name is Heather McG, and this is the Happily Never After, a podcast that explores how life's endings can lead to a personal breakthrough. Because sometimes the end is just the beginning. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Happily Never After, a podcast where we explore how life's endings can lead to a new beginning. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate, review, and follow us wherever you are listening or watching the show today. And my guest today, I'm so excited, is Kate Anthony. She's the author of The D Word, Making the Ultimate Decision About Your Marriage, and host of the New York Times recommended The Divorce Survival Guide podcast. I've heard about you for many years before today, so I'm excited to have you here. Kate is a divorce coach who helps women with children specifically decide if they should stay or leave their marriages, and then either helps them heal the relationships or exit with grace. Kate is also certified as a domestic violence advocate, a co-parenting specialist, and a high conflict divorce coach. She's been through her own divorce journey. So this is all something that she has personally been through as well, which I think is important to note. And it's been exactly where these women that you work with, including me, have been. So I'm so pleased to have you today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Let's start at the beginning with your divorce. What happened? What is your divorce story?
Oh boy. It was so long ago. My divorce story was, first of all, I've been divorced for over 16 years. So it was it was long before social media, really. There was no Instagram, there were no podcasts, right? I didn't really understand what was happening in my marriage. I knew that it was bad. I knew that I was trying everything, but it felt like the goalpost kept moving. Like every time I would do the one thing that he would say would be the thing that would stop him from criticizing me, from gaslighting me, which I now know is gaslighting, right? Blaming me for everything. It was like this, constant moving of the goalpost. And I felt like I was crazy. I felt like he wanted me. I kept saying to him, if I was just a robot, I think it would be better because then you could program me, right? Which is like a horrifying thing to think or feel in your marriage or to have to say to your spouse, right? And look, I didn't understand it at the time. What I now know is that I was being very badly emotionally abused. I also didn't know that I was being compulsively cheated on.
Oh my gosh.
That my husband was never faithful to me, probably throughout our entire dating relationship. Like I just didn't know that at the time. I did not know that it is contraindicated to go to therapy with someone who is emotionally abusing you, or any form of abuse, by the way. I didn't know that it was.
Wait, can we stop right there? What do you mean by that? Sorry, I'm sorry for interrupting. I was like, that's interesting.
No,
what
you're
is
like,
that?
hold on a minute.
Wait a minute. Now I want to know.
Here's the problem. Most therapists are not trained in this. This is not recognizing domestic abuse. Any sign of domestic violence or abuse is not part of basic training for therapists. They have to go on to get more certifications and training, continuing education to learn these things. And yet, almost all therapists right out of therapy school will see couples because they've studied, internal family systems. They've studied, right, like relationship, whatever it is. They've studied Gottman, all of these things, but they have never been trained in. It is not part of their training to recognize signs of abuse. And yet, going to therapy with an abuser is contraindicated because abuse is not a therapy issue. It's not a relationship issue, and it is not a communication issue. It is an abuser issue.
My God, you've been here 5 minutes. I'm having a moment already.
Yeah, I know, right? When you learn this shit, you're like, no wonder it didn't work. Right? And we're pouring all of this, and we go to therapy. We're like, okay, this is going to help, right? And we're so earnest in our, sort of desire for it to help and for it to work. And like, okay, we're finally going to get somewhere because we put all of this faith in the therapist because we kind of feel like therapists are God in many senses, right?
Yeah.
And now that I do what I do, I cannot begin to tell you the number of bad therapists that are out there. Therapists unless they seek additional training, don't recognize these signs. The other reason that therapy is contraindicated is that abusers are not there to solve a problem. They're there to gather intel. They don't want to solve the problem. They don't think actually there is a problem other than you. Obviously, you're the problem.
Yeah.
But what they tend to do is they learn therapy speak to then weaponize against you at home. They learn your more vulnerable spots to then weaponize against you at home. And often they can manipulate the therapist into sort of becoming an abuser by proxy, right? Where a
Yeah.
therapist will be like, well, I don't know, like, why can't you XYZ or whatever, like, yeah, it shouldn't be that hard for you to, maybe you should make sex dates when there's like sexual coercion and you don't feel
Yeah.
safe having sex with this person. But like the
Right.
therapist now wants you to have sex dates, right? To like bridge that divide. So it's very dangerous to go to therapy with an abuser. I
My
didn't know
gosh.
that.
Now,
Yeah.
no. My mind is like blown right now because I am thinking, and I'm sure you have the same experience of the many, many, many women in my life who have been in abusive marriages, went to therapy, and like this situation was happening. Like I'm thinking about, and they didn't even know it's doubled down because they didn't realize they were in an abusive marriage at that time.
Right. And you think, well, a therapist would know this and they would call it out, right? So a good therapist will pull you aside and say, "I actually can't work with you guys as a couple because this is happening, but I need to tell you actually what's happening in
Yeah.
this relationship dynamic and give you some tools." And a lot of therapists will agree to work with you one-on-one, uh, but they won't work with an abuser.
Mm.
Now, my therapist didn't do that. So, what happened in my marriage was the moment for me, like the aha moment for me was that our therapist also kept telling us that we needed to stay married for my son. And my son was like two and a
Oh my
half, right?
God.
And yeah, so there was this book written in the early 2000s, I think it came out in 2000, that was all about how marriage destroys children and that you have to stay married no matter what, because the worst thing that you could ever do for your child is get divorced. Like that's the thing that will destroy
The
everything.
divorce destroys children.
Divorce
Okay.
destroys
Yeah.
children.
Okay.
This was done by like a quote researcher, therapist and then so everybody like this was like the Bible at that point. And it turned out that she had done no actual research, that it was not a peer-reviewed study, and it was only from like something like a few, like a handful of children were studied from one county in one state. Like it was not controlled. Like there was nothing about it that it was actual research, right? There was a lot of domestic violence in the homes. Like the kids were screwed up, not because of
Yeah.
the divorce, but because of the toxicity that was around them, whether the parents got divorced or not.
Right.
And so this was widely debunked, but this is what my therapist was like hanging her hat on, that like no, divorce is terrible for children. So you have to stay together for your son. And I just had this moment of clarity one day where I was like standing in my closet staring into like nothingness as you
Mhm.
do, right? And all of a sudden I realized, and I don't know where it came from, it was like just a moment of clarity. And I realized that if I stayed in my marriage, my son was going to become an abuser, that my son was going to choose really like kind of meek codependent women to kind of prey upon, that he was going to treat them exactly the way his father treated me. And that the only way my child, who was, 2.5, 3 at the time, the only way he had a chance was if I got out, and I got out, like, quickly.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I was like, "Oh, I have to leave for him.
Yeah.
I have to leave for him."
Something that's interesting about that, like when you have more time out after you've left,
Yes.
that you are also important. It's okay to
Yeah.
leave for yourself too.
Yes. I mean, look, and it took me years before I got to that
Yeah.
point and understood that and did that work and all of that. But that is now what
Right.
a sort of a foundational tenet of my work that, I say at the end of every episode of my podcast that you, my love, deserve to be happy.
Yeah.
And there are women who listen to my podcast and they go all the way through to hear that because they say that they just hear my voice saying that and it's calming and soothing because it's a radical concept, right?
Right.
And it's a radical concept for a number of reasons. We live in a society in which, women are not meant to choose, right? We are I mean, this whole pick me thing, which whatever, but really, right, that's what this is. We wait for boys to ask us to dance at the school dances. We wait for boys to ask us out. We
Yeah.
wait for men to ask us on dates. We wait for men to ask us to marry them. And so why on earth would we think we get a choice to be the chooser at this point, right? That's just not the way we no, it's the way we are conditioning and socializing our girls now. But, I'm 54. I was not conditioned this way in the 70s, even though my mom was a single mom and was was a radical feminist and all of the things. I didn't absorb that.
Well, it's also that's what abuse does to someone because it
Well,
beats
that's
them
right.
down so far that
Exactly.
you really start to believe these things. You start to believe that I used to say, sometimes I just feel like a piece of gum in the street, because
That's
that's
right.
something you really
That is
internalize,
Yep.
and you don't think you have any value. And so I think that's kind of where you're at when a lot of women are ready to leave. Their self esteem could not be lower.
That's right.
And I also think it's interesting too, more and more women are leaving. More and more women that we see the numbers are going up, specifically initiated by women in heterosexual marriages.
Yep.
And sometimes I really think a lot of it is we have so much more access to information. Like you were saying, when you got divorced, social media wasn't a thing. And
Huh.
now I think we have so much more access to
Mhm.
being able to recognize abuse, being able to recognize when something's not right. And
100%.
social media has many problems, but that is something that I think is really good. And honestly, I think that is part of why more women are leaving these
Absolutely.
days.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think we have way more access to information and, the scales are tipping in terms of, finances, more women are
Yeah.
higher income earners, we have higher levels of education and we're going to therapy and we're doing the work and there has become a broader disconnect between the genders in those areas where women are like, "Oh, I actually don't need you. You're
Yeah.
kind of a you're not only are you not participating, but you're kind of dragging me down." Um
Hmm.
and so what am I doing here?
Yeah. Why am I
Right?
here?
Why am I here? Yeah,
What do
and
you
we
think
used
about?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you, what do you think about, and I want to be careful how I talk about this because it has nothing to do with what's right or wrong. Everyone should have the choice to do what they want. But I
Mhm.
get anxious at times when some of my perhaps younger family members or friends talk about becoming a stay at home mom.
Yeah,
And it's
as you
not that
should.
there's anything wrong with that, on the surface. It makes me
That's right.
anxious because you just never know what will happen. And the women
That's
I
right.
know who stayed a lot longer than they should, it's because they had no financial resources. They did not have a job. They did not
That's exactly
have
right.
access to their own things where they could leave.
That's right. That's right. I think it's a trap, unfortunately. I think it's the biggest mistake that women make. And again, I think you're right. I think look, I was a stay-at-home mom, right?
Yeah.
But I was not being financially abused the way that many, many women are. If you're given an allowance, that's financial abuse. One thing I want to say that if you're a stay-at-home mom and have been considering leaving your marriage and you don't leave because of finances and you have ever been told that it's his money, that it's not your money, get a load of the laws in your state because in almost all states, you have access to at least 50% of that money legally, whether he gives you access or not. I know many women who have been stay-at-home moms who I say to them, you would be better off financially if you left because your settlement would give you your own money. There's no such thing in marriage as his money or your money.
Right.
It's all marital. I mean, when women give up access to the workforce and making their own money, they tie themselves to a man in a way that creates an immediate power imbalance, unless there's some very, very strict agreements put in place in the very beginning. So, first of all, a clear understanding that the amount of labor you're doing in the home has worth. It has financial worth. Most men would not be able to be as successful as they are if they didn't have a woman at home taking care of all the domestic labor, right? So there's actually a price tag on that. There's a monetary value to that. Make sure you have equal access to all of the bank accounts. You want to know how much money is going in, going out at all times. You want your name to be on every account and all the credit cards, everything. And you need your own login for all of the accounts. If any of that is being withheld from you, you're being financially abused. And that, abuse is about power and control. Period. End of story. And so if somebody is withholding that information from you, it's because they're trying to maintain power and control over you. And that is dangerous. Again, it's a choice. I think most of us don't make the choice from an extremely informed place. I think
Yeah.
most of us make the choice uh, out of fantasy or, right, it's the fairy tale, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, it's really fucking different when you're in it. I mean, I don't know about you, but it was mind numbing to me.
I
Was that.
was I was in a fog. Like sometimes that's why I think divorce can be really interesting because when you're in it, you don't see it. You
You
really
don't.
don't. And I was like friends were dropping. I had friends, like they noticed how I was changing.
That's
I
right.
didn't see it.
I
And it's
didn't
kind
either.
of interesting looking back. It is so obvious. So obvious, but yet I really would love to learn more about the mental
Okay.
state. Because it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of funny. Divorce
Mm-hmm.
is such a big change, and you need to advocate for yourself. You have to make some really big decisions. Yet, you are probably in the most mentally and emotionally unstable phase of your
That's right.
entire life, quite
That's right.
probably.
Right. And that's why I have a job, right?
Yes.
Because, right? Because, when you have experienced that much trauma and that many, that many blows to your self esteem, you don't trust yourself. You don't
Yeah.
trust your ability to make decisions. Sometimes your brain doesn't the executive function portions of your brain are not functioning. When you are in a state of trauma and your amygdala is activated, your prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functioning and reasoning and all those things, goes to sleep. It has to. That's the way it works. So when you're in a trauma state, when you're in a fight, flight, or freeze, most of us spend almost all of our time in that state in order to survive an abusive marriage. So when that's activated, we are actually unable to reason. It
Oh,
it
wow.
is physiologically impossible to do so, right?
You are
So
relieving so much guilt, I think, because you feel so
yeah,
stupid and like the worst,
you
right? You feel
do.
so weak
You
and
feel
stupid.
why didn't I see it? How could I, right? And also, there's like a brainwashing that's happened, right? Where you're just constantly told that you're the problem. And so, that moving target thing again, right? It's like, well, okay, I wouldn't have to have hit you if you had just, or whatever the thing is. And, and so then you're like, okay, I'll do that thing. So here's the real, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff, right? But I think the important thing to know too is that there's the cycle of abuse that we all talk about, right? And it's a flawed cycle. We don't actually use it in domestic violence anymore, but I think it's actually an important sort of conversation piece
Mm-hmm.
because you've got the top of the cycle is the honeymoon period. Everything's amazing, or it's just like fine and peaceful and normal, right? And then there's the tension building, and the tension builds, and something is brewing, right? Those of us who've been in the cycle long enough know, like, oh shit. You can feel the tension. You know something's about to happen. You don't know why. You don't know how. You don't know what the problem is, but you know it's coming. And then there's the explosion, the incident, whether that's they hit you, they scream and yell, they throw things, whatever form that your flavor of abuse, comes in, it happens. And then there is the sort of the calm after the storm. There's the reconciliation. It might be an apology. It might be that they bring you flowers, they buy you jewelry. They're like, it's never going to happen again. I'm so sorry. Or it just gets swept under the rug like nothing ever happened. And you're just kind of waiting for it to go back to like the happy normal, right? When we are victims, right, we think that the happy normal, whether that's, in some really toxic relationships, that's that intensity of love. It's like, oh my God, we're just like soulmates and we have this incredible sex and the connection and da 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 da, right? And then the violence happens and, we think that that is the relationship. We think that the happiness, the joy, the connection,
Oh,
or
yeah.
just the
Yep.
like, skating on the surface, we think that's the relationship. And
Yeah.
that we kind of go through this and we're like, well, if we can just get back to that, everything will be fine.
Right. He
And
loves
what
me.
we're,
This is the best connection I've ever. Yeah, you're right. I think for some reason, we hang on to the best it can be as this is what it's supposed to be, when
and that's what
actually
it
it's
is.
right,
It's the
when
whole
it's
thing.
not.
What we don't, what we don't acknowledge is that it's actually the entire cycle. That is the relationship. And the violence included, the toxicity included, like it's the whole thing. And we're just like, well, if we can just get back to here, we'll stay here. Right. And every
Yeah.
time we get up to the joy and the happiness, the connection or the calm, we think it's going to last. We're like, okay, we're good. We're through it. Everything's fine. And then the tension builds again.
Right.
Right. And it takes a really long time for us to recognize that, like, oh, no, 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 that is a pattern. Right. Whatever
Yeah.
it is that it looks like for you, find the pattern and recognize that that is the relationship.
Yeah. I I used to tell some of the women that I was talking to and working with that once you have bought a book that says something like, "Why does he do that?"
Mhm.
That's like the death knell, I think, because is he buying that
Yeah.
book? Probably not. Why are you like,
No,
this is not a
absolutely
good
not.
sign.
Mhm. That's right. He's never buying the book that says, "Am I doing that?" Yeah,
Right.
right? And Lundy didn't write that book. He wrote the
Yeah.
other one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So for women, you literally wrote the book on this, on deciding when and how and whether to leave your marriage. What are some,
Yeah.
for some women, and it's okay to leave your marriage if you're not being abused and it's just not working. That's also okay.
Yep.
What are some of
You get to
your like
choose.
top pieces of things to think about when
Mhm.
you're trying to figure out if you should leave?
Well, I think the most important thing is to take the focus off the other person, right? We spend so much time looking at them. It's like, well, is what they're doing bad enough? Or like, they're really nice and they love me. And, it doesn't, well, that doesn't rise to the level of like getting divorced. Like, that's too much. Or, right. And so rather than looking at what they're doing and constantly sort of putting a microscope up to their behavior and like, well, turn that around on yourself and look at your own experiences and feelings, maybe over time, right? Like, and as you said, like, if he's the greatest guy in the world, but he's not your greatest guy, and it's like, I can't, you get to get out of that marriage. Like, are you actually
Yeah.
sacrificing your whole life because you just kind of feel bad? We
There's,
get one shot at this life. That's it, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's real. There's a line from, and a lot of divorced women have also read the book Untamed by Glennon
Sure.
Doyle. And
Exactly.
there
Yep.
is you probably remember this. There in one of the early chapters, she talks about when she was deciding whether to leave her marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and she was starting to realize that she was probably not straight, or almost definitely not straight, and that
Uh-huh.
she should be with a woman. And she does this whole description. At the end, she says, she's like thinking about, what if I had this other life? I could have a family with a woman and have this whole life. And the way she finished it was, well, maybe in another life. And her last sentence just killed me. It said, wow, as if we had more than one. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh my, I think that's when I decided to get a divorce, when I read that line. But yeah, it's true.
Exactly.
You get one shot.
You get one and that's it. That's it. And so I think that looking at yourself and your own experiences, like and I have actually in my book and on my website, I have a healthy relationship checklist to kind of help you sort through. And it's really about yourself and your feelings. Like, do I feel healthy? Do I feel emotionally safe? Do I
Yeah.
feel seen? Do I feel connected? Do I feel like my partner likes me? Do I like my partner? Do I feel like there's a lot of like, do I feel questions in there? And the answers can be surprising, but probably not, to be honest. I mean, because, as you said, like if you're questioning, should I stay or should I go? If you're like up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're typing that into Google and you're coming up to my website, if you're buying a book called The D Word, Making the Ultimate Decision About Your Marriage, people who are in healthy, happy relationships are not Googling these things and buying these books.
Right. Yeah. I like to say, if you have given up hope that it will ever get better or improve, that's it, for
That's it.
sure. There are other reasons, but
Absolutely.
if you
Yeah.
feel that way, you're done, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, again, like you said, it's really hard because we are not used to making that decision. And like, who am I to make that decision? And how, and then what, right? So one of the other things I ask women to do is to stop trying to figure out how. Let's just start with what, right? The how will come, the how will get figured out, the how, like, we don't need to worry about the how right now, because what we tend to do is go, but then how will I live and where will I live? And will I
Yeah.
have, how much money will I have? Right? Everything is probably, as Marie Forleo says, everything is figure outable, right? We'll be able to figure all of those details out. So let's put that aside, because that's the stopper right there. It's like, well, I don't know how I'm going to blah, 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 blah. So I can't. Okay. Let's pretend that stuff doesn't exist. Let's actually just look at the what first. If all the hows were figured out in advance and wave a magic wand, what would you want to do? And usually the answer is pretty clear for
Yeah.
most women.
This conversation, sadly, and this is such a common conversation, right? With the rate of divorce and women in
Yep.
not ideal situations. I remember recently, I had a conversation with someone, and she's not happy in her marriage. It's not working out. And she was like, but I can't leave. It would, because of this, that, and the other. And, trying to be gentle, like when women are in that state, I'm not as direct as I am right now, trying to be gentle with it and trying to talk to her about the fact that you are choosing to stay. She's like, no, I can't leave. It's like jettisoning that
That's right. Mm-hmm.
power. And I'm struggling to find the exact words. Hopefully, what I'm trying to communicate, that there is an aspect of personal responsibility
That's right.
for your own
Absolutely.
life, and you are choosing to stay, even because the conditions will absolutely never be perfect for you to leave. That's not
Sure.
happening.
Exactly. And look, I want to be very mindful of the fact that when women leave abusive relationships is the most dangerous time in the relationship.
Yeah.
Um, you know, 75% of domestic homicides occur when someone leaves. So there are women who can't leave safely,
Yeah.
right? They cannot leave alone. They cannot leave without serious support, help, intervention, all of that, right? They can still leave. Um There, look, can you leave without consequences? Of course not. Can you leave without, I mean, look, I think there are women who leave and have absolutely nothing. They are penniless, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, and they leave, right? So the idea of like, I can't leave, like, look, sometimes it really feels true, right?
Yeah.
I would say I can't leave without serious support and intervention would be a more accurate descriptor, and I don't know anything about this person's marriage. I can't leave because we literally don't have money, and I don't know. I literally could not, a
Right.
lot of people don't have family support, they don't have the money, they don't have, and those are all very legitimate concerns.
Yeah. The
Most
worries are
something.
real. The circumstances are real. The consequences are real. And
Mhm.
it and it's a d
Mhm.
it's difficult because a lot of times it's, "I can't leave without help. I can't leave without these certain conditions." And then it starts to become where you are getting that part of everything is figure outable, of trying
Mhm.
to figure out how to set the stage to be able to leave and make a better life because the alternative is you stay where you are.
That's
And is
right.
that okay?
Right. And that is, and sometimes, sometimes that the devil is more preferable. At least I know what this whole thing looks like, and and it's sad and tragic that women, is going back to choosing to be a stay-at-home mom, right? Because it's really, we put ourselves in that position often when we are not financially responsible and financially empowered in our relationships. It does become harder and harder to leave. And it's something like 95% of uh people who leave who are being financially abused return because of money,
Yeah, right.
because
It's
because
hard.
yeah, because when they're out, they can't afford, diapers or whatever it is. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it is tough. I mean, I hear what you're saying, right? I think there's a place to acknowledge the difficulty and then say, "Look, I get it. It's not easy,
Yeah,
but if we could make this happen for you,
right.
would you want to? Would you be willing?" And sometimes the answer is
Yeah.
no, and that's okay. Like, that's a choice. That's a choice,
Yeah.
but it is a choice, as you
Yes,
say.
yeah, it is such a complicated conversation because it's just like acknowledging the many complications of divorce and life and figuring things out and the trade-offs and you also on your in your work, you're very clear that the challenges that women face in divorce are exponentially increased for many women of color. Can you speak
Mm.
to that a little bit too?
I think it's really important to look at our society as a whole and to recognize that any struggle that a white woman might have in, leaving a marriage, becoming more financially independent, are often more difficult for women of color who make, you know, 68 cents on the dollar rather than our 78% of the dollar. Like,
Right.
what, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like, less. They
Yeah,
have
pay parity. Yeah,
the gender pay gap is far worse for women of color. So there's a lot in our culture that makes all of this more difficult for women of color,
yeah. Well, too
potentially.
yes, for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so after we make the I like to say getting divorced is terrible. Being divorced is just fine.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
getting through that process. And then you start to rebuild. And it
Yeah.
takes, going from rock bottom to literally, I know for me, there were a lot of things I had to rebuild that I didn't expect. I knew I would have to
Yes.
rebuild the way I thought about romantic relationships, really work on myself, rebuilding my self esteem. I didn't realize how it touches literally everything. It changed my
Everything.
family of origin relationships. It changed my friendships. I
Your
lost a lot of
friendships.
friends.
Yep.
I built a lot of new friends, the importance of
Yep.
community. I
Yep.
just did not expect it to be as far reaching of a change as it ended up being. It
It
was
is.
huge.
It's so true. And the friendship thing is something that you just don't count on. I always tell people, like, please count on it. Please count on the fact that your friends are going to have really weird reactions to your divorce,
Yeah,
and that the people that you really thought were going to be there for you won't be or might not be. And it's
yeah,
not has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the mirror you're holding up to their relationships or whatever. But they are you don't count on it. And so I always say, like, count on it. Please count on it. because things will change in ways that can be so shocking. And you're like, oh my God, I'm going through a fucking divorce. Do I also have to go through the like grieving my 20-year best friendship ending too, like, at the
Yeah.
same time?
Yeah.
And, like,
Yeah.
yeah, very often you do. Yeah,
Yeah, I actually did lose a 20-year
me
best friend
too.
through this process, and there was a particular point, and this was, like, maybe 6 months-ish
Uh-huh,
after I
uh-huh.
left, so I was, like, at the bottom still, and, I was flailing around, making a lot of bad I wouldn't say they weren't dangerous choices, it's just the way you act when you were desperately depressed and anxious and going through a divorce and changing your entire life.
Yes,
And I was dating and all of those things.
yes,
And I remember
totally.
she said to me, I don't know who you are anymore. It feels like you're just like flailing around trying to figure things out. And it really hurt my feelings at the time. But later, when I had more clarity and I was a little bit more together, and I let her go, so that we're not friends anymore. But later, when I had more clarity, I was like, that's what waking up and healing looks like. That's
Mm,
really what it looks like. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time.
that's
And
right.
yeah, it's gonna be messy. It is gonna be
That's right.
messy for a while, and it's okay for friendships to change, and, like, I'm not saying she had obligation to stick around for that, but that is the truth of what was happening. It's not that
Totally.
life feels like a mess, but guess what? You're actually putting your life back together in a way that you want and need it to be. That's what's
Yeah,
actually happening.
right. I love that reframe because it's true. It's like, yeah, I am a mess right now. Yeah, you're right. You're right. And not only like, the last thing you needed at that moment was her judgment, maybe some
Yeah,
compassion, but also, like, for the most part, like, you realize when people are going through it, you're like, "I'll just stand back and let them like, give them some space and time because this is probably,
too
they're
much.
going through the thing." Right? And that's why people
Yeah,
who've gotten divorced become your closest friends when you're getting divorced
yeah,
because they get it, they know what's going on. And, the other thing that happens is that very often the people who are the hardest on you during the process are the next to go, right?
yeah,
Like they really are freaking out about what you're showing them about their own lives and relationships. And it's not comfortable for them. But then, like, usually like a year later, their marriages are ending too. And you're like, oh, uh huh, look at that.
it's all
And the
making sense now.
it's all making sense. And then, the other thing I'll say is that very often these are best friends when we are in these relationships are people that were chosen with sort of the same picker that chose the people that we're married to. And I think this was true in
Yeah,
my case. I had my two best friends I lost during my divorce and sort of in the subsequent years. And what I realized over time was that these relationships were also toxic, that these relationships were
yeah,
also built on really fucked up power dynamic and power over and that the person I was becoming no longer aligned with the unconscious agreements that had been made 20 years prior, in college. And that I was actually becoming a person who no longer fit the relationships as they were constructed. And that
yep,
actually losing those friendships was one of the best and healthiest things that ever happened because it meant that I was actually organically shifting across my whole life, not
yep,
just like leaving a marriage, right? I was
yep.
changing who I was in the world and in relationships across the board.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, for women that are diving in and working on themselves, data shows that women do tend to do that. It changes you in a 360 manner. It's
that's
not
right.
just how you date, it's not just how you do relationships. Because I had the same realization. Honestly, it kind of bowled me over a little bit where
Mhm.
I could pick out a few of my friendships in my life didn't work anymore. They didn't work for me
That didn't
because
work.
I was
Right.
different at that point.
You're
I
not
don't
gonna
know. It's
keep
fascinating.
playing. It is because 'cause you're like, "I'm not playing that role anymore. I'm not playing that
Yeah.
role in any aspect of my life." And then people are like, but but you're supposed to."
Yeah. Well, and two, something I think is interesting. So, in greater numbers, women are choosing to stay single. or they're like, I'm good. I'm good the way I
I'm
am.
good.
Maybe I'll
That's
date,
right.
but, I'm not going to get into something serious or anything long term. I'm not going to get married, which I think is a great way to figure out what really works for you.
Mhm.
However, there are groups of women that do decide to get married again, whether second marriages, third
Mhm.
marriages,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, those fail at an even greater rate than first marriages. What is
Uh-huh.
about that? How can women stop making the same mistakes over and over again?
If your response to your divorce is, "Well, he was an asshole. Let me find someone who's not." And you
Yeah,
don't do that work to figure out what happened, what growth do you need to do? Um, and how do you need to evolve and grow and heal and all of those things? You're gonna make the same mistake. And he's gonna look different. He's gonna, have a different job. But like a few years in, you're gonna be like, "Oh my god, he's the same guy." So, the only way to not make the same mistake over and over again is to do the work on yourself, heal those wounds, really figure out, like, "Okay, what had me choose this person?" Because usually it's our childhood trauma, it's usually unresolved shit from our childhood that we have to get down and dirty with a therapist about, or, work with a coach to make different choices and to you know, go slowly, to really, acknowledge the flags as they come up, right? And it all of that requires a certain level of work to, you're switching your picker, really, right?
yeah,
And that's on you.
yeah. And everyone can handle these things in all kinds of different ways, and we're all different.
Mhm.
I do think what can be helpful is making sure you create space to really do some reflection and some room to figure out what's going on with you. I have one friend and she is just, her story makes me crack up so hard. She was married twice and she was like, well, I had to marry a man twice to figure out I'm actually gay.
Yeah.
She was like, if I would have taken a
Ah,
minute, I think I would have figured it out a little soon.
that's right. Oh, well, there she is. Now she knows.
She figured it out, which makes me
Congratulations.
laugh.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yes.
Yeah, listen, and I think you do have to take that space. I think so many of us go out and start dating quickly after because we wanna avoid the pain. We want to avoid what's showing up in our emotional inbox. We want to not deal. And when we do that, we rob ourselves of the ability to heal and grow and make different choices, right? And so
Yeah.
you will see people get divorced and just get out there and start playing the field and dating and listen, I think there's nothing wrong with dating in that first year after divorce. I think it's a great way to get your mojo back, especially if you were
Yeah.
criticized or emotionally abused, right? You can uh, my favorite thing is my ex-husband told me that I wasn't a sexual being in our marriage, and that's why we weren't having sex. Not because
It was
he was
geeky.
fucking everything else that moved. No, it was because I was not a sexual being. And I started to believe that, I was like, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it's true, but it's like, no, I didn't feel emotionally safe in that relationship. Did not
Right.
feel emotionally safe enough to open myself up to have sex with somebody, I'm sorry, who was abusing me, right?
There is such a powerful transition in what you're describing right now and moving from, and you hit on this earlier, which this has been a theme. And I think this is going to be my big takeaway about how we wait for men to tell us.
Uh-huh.
We wait for men to give us permission. We wait for men to make the first move in all kinds of ways. And there's this transition through divorce where we stop listening to being told who we are, being
That's
told what
right.
we can do, being told what we're capable of, to standing on your own 2 feet and you are who you are and being confident in that,
Absolutely. Yep.
which is really beautiful, and there's a lot of joy to that
Mhm.
experience, I think.
Yeah, I love, what my therapist said to me was when I was first early dating, right? And I was like, turns out I really like sex. Turns out I think I
Mhm.
actually am a sexual being. Turns out I'm really good at this and it's really fun, right? And
Yeah.
she said, Right, so I was relearning. It was like, "Oh, he identified me as not a sexual being. Actually, I take that power back. I am a very sexual being. Thank you very much." Right? And that
Yeah.
was a powerful experience, and what my therapist said to me at the time was she goes, "Great. And that, I want you to remember, has nothing to do with the man that you're having sex with right now, right? That's yours and it's portable, and you get to
Yeah.
bring it." I love it, the idea of it being portable, right? You get to bring that anywhere that you go. You get to
Yeah.
bring
It
that into
belongs
any
to you.
relationship. It belongs to you.
Right.
And it was so powerful for me to recognize that, like, I no longer had to be identified as whatever the thing was that my ex said that I was. I got to identify myself and it got to be mine, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
that I was identifying through somebody else telling me that I'm this thing, right?
There is a lot of joy in being divorced, which I know sounds funny, but I really believe
No,
it. That
tons.
getting
I agree.
divorced, no joy in that. But there's a lot of joy in being divorced. It's
Absolutely.
just after fighting for your life so hard and then you find it and you put it together, like it's worth it.
Absolutely.
Um,
I agree.
as as we are getting wrapped up here, so there's a lot of women out there, and some of them may be listening, either trying to figure out if they're going to leave, or they're in the early throes of divorce. For those women in the closet staring at nothing, as you did so many years ago, what would you like to say to those?
To say to them what I always say, which is that you deserve to be happy. That, there's that wonderful, oft quoted Mary Oliver quote that says, this is your one wild and precious life. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? And it really is that this is it. You get to be happy, you get to make choices that make you happy, that fulfill you. You get to be, quote, selfish, and it's okay. Um, the other thing that I always say to women who are moms who are questioning this is, and it's a very clarifying question usually, is this the relationship you want for your children? Right? Is this if you were to take the model of your relationship and hand it to your children, would you want that for them? And if the answer is no, just know that we tend to repeat the patterns of our parents. And that's possibly how you got to where you are now. And if you want to break the cycle and you don't want this, if you don't want this for your kids, it's on you to break the cycle.
I think that's super practical because I think it's just the
Hmm.
nature of moms. Like I
Oh,
can
yeah.
say it on a personal level, that's how I figured it out. I think it's a really good practical question to ask that will get you to an answer that is helpful.
We are we are often, as moms, more apt to do something for our kids than we would ever do for
Yeah.
ourselves, right? Which is why when I ask women that question, it can be like, "Whoa, no." Right? And then all of a sudden the mama bears out and you're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Let's go with that." Right? We will do things for our kids that we don't have the strength of or presence of mind or clarity to do for ourselves. And so if that is a clarifying answer for you, then go for it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Kate, thank you so much for being here today. I so appreciate you making the time to come and share
Yeah.
your story. Where can people find you if they want to work with you or hear more from you?
Thank you. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. Everyone can just find me on my website. It's the easiest place to go and it leads to everywhere else. And that's kateanthony.com. You will find resources on there if you want to work with me. There's drop downs on how to do that. And I have things at different price points. I've got online programs and then I've got a amazing group coaching program for women going through divorce. And then I work with one-on-one with women all over the world.
It's amazing. And I will link Kate's information in the show notes so it's really easy for you to get a hold of her. I want to
Mhm.
thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank everyone who's been listening today, especially those of you who are on your own journey. And for the gals thinking about getting divorced, you get one life. So just think about that a little bit.
Yep.
We hope you have a good week and we will see you next Tuesday.